A lot of organizations will use this. I first encountered it in my youth. Outreach was the church, going out and feeding the homeless, to bring them into the church. Well, it's the same thing, whether it's church or Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts or the Astronomy Club. It's spreading the word. Hey, do you think telescopes are cool? How can you find people who think telescopes are cool? How about you just set up a telescope and see who comes over and looks at it? So it's a great way to spread word. Obviously, it's working for you guys. You guys have had tremendous growth here in the last year. It is also a small way that you can change the world. I haven't done this, like I said, on Halloween. I've never looked through a telescope before. That's the most amazing thing I've ever seen. It's that really Saturn. And it just blows kids' minds, and it also blows a lot of adults' minds. And it's a little bit of a adrenaline rush when you start doing that. And you realize you've opened up somebody's mind to a much bigger world of possibilities. And maybe, going into science or that astronomy class isn't quite as scary as you thought it was. It's a great way to instill awe and wonder in the general public. Does it make any difference? Well, listen, if you want to get some dark sky ordinance passed in your local community, you're not going to get that if people don't care about the sky, if they don't care about astronomy. My favorite question at Starbucks is, can we look at a galaxy? And I say, no, not here. See all these lights? Can't really do that very well. Make them care about light pollution, make them care about conservation in that way. It's also a great way to make science more approachable. Let's face it, I'm not going to get on a political soapbox, but it's hard to argue that scientific literacy in this country is on the decline, and people don't trust people with telescopes and lab coats and scientific backgrounds as much as they used to. It's not looked at that way. So this is a good way to sort of say, I'm just a person, look, oh yeah, and you talk to them, they get to know you, and it kind of breaks down those barriers. You start talking to each other, and you can kind of understand where each other's coming from, and people are a lot more open to that. If you do any studying on psychology on influence, how to influence, 99.999% of it is making a personal connection with them and getting them to trust you. You ever argue with somebody about the flat earth or lunar conspiracies, and you give them all these facts? Stop. Anybody who knows anything about science of influence will tell you the most effective way to change somebody's mind is to present them with facts, because they don't trust you. You have to win their trust first. And in order to do that, you have to build some sort of rapport with them and say, hey, I've got a telescope. No, nobody's making this up. The moon's really there. I've had people who didn't believe the moon was real. Look at it. You can see it. It's obviously round when you look at it. You can see it with your own eyes. This isn't some NASA conspiracy that's going on. I've already talked about that. Sometimes I get a little ahead of my slides. Also to improve scientific literacy. See, I don't need slides. I could just talk. It's also great for membership recruiting, again, which I'm preaching to the choir here. It's also a lot of fun. I don't know how many times I've been like, I really don't feel like going and setting up tonight. And I'll go up there and I'm like, it's going to be cloudy, it's going to be cloudy. My wife's like, you better take the telescope, it might clear up. I'm fine, I'll dump it in the car. I go up there and there's somebody there waiting. It's like, are you the astronomy guy? And then it clears up and you set the telescope up, and then 3 hours later I'm going home, I'm like, wow, I'm so glad that I did that. It's kind of like exercising. Sometimes you feel kind of good when you come back from the gym, but for some reason it's really hard to motivate yourself to go on a regular basis. So we're there to try to educate people with telescopes. Now this is a common pitfall too. How much education is really practical? Well, the truth is very little. You're not really going to convince anybody that the world is round next to your telescope. All you can do really is sort of plant seeds and kind of instill some desire and curiosity to want to learn more. I'm in my 50s and I've seen lots of things on, we got a lot of conspiracy things, all right? So I'll use flat earth and the moon landings as examples, but there are other things where that's capable. I was raised in an environment that was very fundamentalist, and there were some very crazy things that I grew up believing and I defended in my early adulthood. And whenever I see somebody say, it doesn't do any good to talk to those people, they're not listening. It's not true. They are listening. But it takes more than a mean meme or calling them an idiot on Facebook. If I go, you're stupid, I'm not going to change your mind to do anything. But this is the sort of way where you start building that bridge to be able to reach people. Think of it as speed dating, all right? You got 3 minutes to make an impression and make a sale and make them want more. And that's your job. So don't get too carried away. Don't get drugged down into arguments with them. Know your audience. Effective communication is extremely important. Mind your terms. I keep a diary. Every time I do an outreach, I go home and I write in the diary. What did I learn tonight about outreach? And I realized I was at the Grand Canyon Star Party, which if you're into outreach, I have to kind of a little aside. The Grand Canyon Star Party is the mecca of outreach events, because it's not a star party where a bunch of amateur astronomers go and hang out all night. You sign up to be a ranger, an interpretive ranger, and they bring in up to 12,000 people on buses, and you're doing outreach all night long. And one of the things I kept hearing, people were showing globular clusters, and they kept talking about gravitationally bound. And I'm like, there's nobody here who didn't bring a telescope who knows what the word gravitationally bound actually means, right? So mind your terms. Remember, you're not talking to an astronomy club. You're not talking to fellow engineers. You're not talking, maybe you're an accountant, but you're into science and you're into space, and so you read up a lot of these things. You gotta assume most of the people you meet at these outreach public events are not nearly as educated as you are on these things. And you have to be approachable. The best investment you can make to learn how to do a good outreach is to bring your wife who's not interested. All right? Because this is what I did. And my wife would sit there, and afterwards she'd say, you know why nobody comes over and talks to you, right? And I'm like, why? She says, because we like what we do. I got a big telescope. I'm pointing at the moon. I love looking at the moon. So what do? I look at the moon. And I'm scrolling around. I'm looking at the moon. Meanwhile, there's people. They're like, what's he doing? I don't know. I don't want to talk to him. And they go on and get their coffee. And she says, you're completely unapproachable. You get absorbed in doing what you're supposed to be showing other people, and you don't even realize that the people are going by. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. You're not here to show off your fancy gear. Encourage questions. Get people to ask you questions. Make it interactive. Don't just form a line, look next, look next, look next. You're not doing anything really effective when you do that. People just, oh, that's 7. Okay, great. Next, get out of the way. We got a bunch of other people that need to come through here. Really, it boils down to what is your motivation for doing outreach. And this is sort of the point that my wife drove home with me, was what is my motivation? I want to look at the moon, and if I do it at home, I feel guilty because I should be cleaning up the garage. So I'll take my telescope up to Starbucks and do outreach, and then I can look at the moon all night. And that was sort of an awakening. It's like, yeah, you're right. It's not really what I was doing, but to some degree, there was a little voice in the back of my head, and that was kind of what I'm doing. And if you look around in my own club, you see the same sorts of things. We all get together, especially when there's a group of us. Like one night she said, you were over there holding court. I'm like, what are you talking about? She said, all your friends came, and you were standing over there talking, and we were having like an astronomy club meeting. And meanwhile, people were coming and going, and there were like some telescopes, and there's people over here talking. And we didn't know it, but for 20 minutes, we were talking amongst ourselves about some star party or this thing that we want to do. And we were really ignoring all of the people who were coming by. And so it's like, well, why are you there? Are you there to socialize with your astronomy club friends? Or are you there to do outreach? Are you there to try to get to new people, bring people in, have that little girl or little boy look through a telescope for their first time? And I'm not trying to be mean about it or anything, because you know how I realized this? Because this is what I was doing, as outreach. And it's subconscious. We really don't realize we're doing it. And it may only be like 5 or 10%, but that 5 or 10% of you that's being drawn that way can have a big impact. So things to think about, of course, when you're doing outreach is accessibility. You're going to have lines. People don't always form orderly lines. Sometimes it's a herd. A lot of times people are very graceful about it. The little boy will run up in front of an old man who's been waiting to look, and let the little boy through. And so you gotta have some people skills to manage these groups. Let's see. You gotta watch a lot of obvious things. If there is a box on the ground that can be stood on, a child will stand on it. Just so you know, all right? I had a little box full of my Naglers. Little kid stepped right up on it to see what his brother was looking at. And I'm like, stop. Cables. We do this all the time. We do it in the dark. We are masters at not tripping over black cables on the black asphalt in the middle of the night. All right? Most people are not that way. A bright red cable on a white foreground in a well-lit parking lot, people will still find that and trip over it. So use batteries. Try to keep everything as swept up as possible because that's really good. And people just don't pay attention. All right, if you do any crowd control, people don't pay attention. Anytime you've got a bunch of people leaving a building, I think there's some kind of a herd gene or some kind of herd behavior, because you can observe this anywhere. People will go out, as soon as they get out the door, they stop, right? Have you ever seen, like at some events, they have a guard there, and as soon as they come out there, they say, keep moving forward. You know why? Because the natural tendency is for you to step out there, and as soon as you enter a new environment, your brain goes, whoa, there's a new environment, I need to look around. So it's not that people are stupid or thoughtless or being rude. It's genetic, it's evolutionary programming. It's like your brain, just part of your brain says, stop, you're in a new environment, you better check out what's going on. And that's why people do that. And people, they get involved, they get excited, they're not looking what they're doing. So you have to really kind of account for that. Grabbing the eyepiece. Who in here does outreach on a regular basis, right? Is there anything you can do to keep people from grabbing the eyepiece?
No.
Yeah.
Pretty much, no. The best, no, don't use the cheap eyepieces. I'm going to talk about, I got a slide about that in a minute. The best solution I've seen is to get one of those little stepped chairs with the back on it, and you put that in front, and you tell them to step up on the chair and hold on to the rail and lean into the eyepiece. And if you do that, it kind of defuses that. And adults will do it too. Adults will reach over and grab that eyepiece. Children will grab over. And I remember years ago at Halloween, my wife would start, she'd go, no, no, no. And then it scares them because they're afraid they're going to damage it. It's like, no, this is a Sherman tank here. So that you're not going to damage it. But that's a very tiny thing you're looking at there. And if you move it, it's not pointing at that tiny thing anymore. And so we need to get them to not grab for it. But that chair trick, step up, grab on, lean in, and look, that seems to work better than anything else. Other than that, no. Because again, there's something about that. They just want to grab it and pull it close to them. Another good solution for that is electronic assistant. I have a whole slide about, two slides about electronic assistants coming up. I just want to mention this here, that this is also a good solution, and just simply putting a camera on there with an LCD can work really well. The other night for International Observe the Moon Night, I was set up at the planetarium with a bunch of other people from my club. And at the end of the night, I wanted to take a picture. So I took the diagonal out and I put my DSLR on there, and I'm turning it sideways, and I've got the live view on, and I'm focusing, and I hear this, and I turn around, and there's like 6 people behind me. Like, that's the coolest thing I've ever seen. And I'm like, I'm just focusing on the moon. But that little LCD really did the trick. I also use a Celestron NextYZ cell phone adapter. And you can put a cell phone on there, and then you can kind of drive around and see it on the cell phone. And then other people come, you can put their cell phones on, and they can record, take their own pictures of the moon. In fact, that's one of the highlights of the Coffee and Cosmos program is do your own lunar photography. And anybody who wants to goes home with a really great photo of the moon. Also, when it comes to the public looking through eyepieces, bring out the good stuff. All right? I'm very sorry. I know that breaks your heart. I tried this. I used to do this. I'm like, I'm not bringing out my Naglers. I'm going to bring out my, I bought that whole box of apostles for $100. I'm going to bring that out and let people look through those. Well, here's the problem: is it's this big, and you probably don't remember, but you had to practice before you could see something through that. The expensive eyepieces, one of the things that makes them expensive is they have really good eye relief, and you can look in there and you can see very easy. Bring out the good stuff. Don't chintz and give them something that's really hard to use. If you've got a nice wide field eyepiece with good eye relief, you should bring that out, because people who aren't practiced at this have a hard time. Try to get people to participate. Don't just lecture them. Ask them questions. Encourage questions. There's no such thing as a stupid question if it's an honest question. So I used to teach a class on computer graphics at a trade school in Orlando, and it's like, anybody says there's no such thing as a stupid question is never a teacher, because there's plenty of stupid questions. But really, a stupid question, the only thing that's a stupid question is when you ask a question that you already know the answer to, and you're trying to pick a fight, or you're trying to cause trouble. Those are stupid questions. If you honestly don't believe that the world is round and you ask about it, that's not a stupid question. If you honestly believe we didn't land on the moon and you ask about it, that's not a stupid question, all right? And it's very difficult to not act surprised. And when you go, what? Oh, what does that do? That immediately sets up a mental barrier in the other person. This is another key aspect of influence, is if someone perceives you to be antagonistic or the enemy, they don't listen to you. They hear what you say, but they're not listening to it, and they're not open to you. And very subtle clues will turn on that instinct. The slightest subtle, no, of course we went to the moon. Or the slightest, really? You're asking me that? We've had people, you've all heard that people think the phases of the moon can be caused by, the Earth's shadow causing. I got you beat. The phases of the moon are caused by clouds in the atmosphere, all right? So how do you not act like, are you a freaking idiot, when somebody asks you something like that? But if you do that, then you've lost them. And they're not you've lost them, and you've lost the ability to reach them. Ask them questions. This is the best way to do it. Don't tell them stuff. Ask them questions and see if you can get them to admit what it is that they're thinking. All right, so teaching opportunities. Tell them about what do we know about what you're looking at. Whatever you're looking at, are there questions we still have that we don't know? All right, why study this stuff? Well, there's still questions we don't know, and the answers are interesting and applicable to things that we're doing on Earth. Why do we care about this? Why is it important that we know how these things work? Special events. These are great, whether it's a transit or an eclipse or whatever. It's a great excuse to throw a party, to dress up. The media will come, they'll cover it, and talk about it. It generates a lot of excitement and generates a lot of promotion for your events. Now, targets. What are you going to look at when you do? Now this, I'm going to get nailed on this. Some of you are not going to like this, all right? But I'm going to tell you straight because I love you. All right, this is going to be hard to swallow, but really, these are about the only things you can look at: the sun, the moon, and the planets. This is my. I should be careful. That's my son's girlfriend there, looking through my telescope. And what I want you to notice is how well lit she is. All right, back behind those people there, you see a little green in the corner. That's a tennis court. All right. These are about the only things you can look at in a well-lit area. Don't show them. Okay, if you have a larger scope and you're in the dark skies, you can do this. But listen, don't do this. All right? You think it's cool. You know why? Don't get angry. It's because you're weird. All right? And I'm weird too. I'm in the same weird. And listen, there's a bell curve, and there's average, and there's below average, and there's above average. Weird can be above average too. But we have tastes that make this exciting to us. This is throwing somebody in the deep end of the pool and going, isn't swimming fun? Because my wife will look at that and she'll say, well, it looks like somebody sneezed and blew their nose on your eyepiece. And you go, it's a galaxy. Those photons travel for 300 million I'm getting bitten by bugs. Are we done yet? It's not. There are people that's exciting to. And a lot of you are in this room. Yay, you're in the astronomy club. All right? But you don't throw people into the deep end of the pool and show them this, especially in a parking lot of Starbucks when you can barely see it. Most people cannot see it. You have to practice. You should be proud. As an amateur astronomer doing visual astronomy, there's all this, visual doesn't even count because you're doing imaging. It's so much harder. There's some physical skill and practice that comes with being an accomplished visual astronomer. And some of you probably have been doing it so long you've forgotten that. You've forgotten how you had to train yourself to use averted vision. You've forgotten how hard it is to find something very faint against a background that's just barely brighter or darker than that is. And you throw this at the general public, it's swirls, what's the phrase? Pearls before swine sort of thing. Most people will just simply pretend that they can see it. And it's real easy to do because you're sitting there describing to them what they're looking at, and they're going to go, oh yeah, I see that. And occasionally they go, oh, and that's when they actually saw it. And that happens for the moon. The moon can fill the entire eyepiece. And 5 minutes after looking in, they'll go, oh, because they finally saw it. They finally actually saw it. They'll see some glare from a street light, and they think that's the planet Jupiter that they're looking at. I'm not kidding. Most who do see it, again, aren't going to be that impressed until you teach them to appreciate it. How many of you like sushi? How many of you like sushi the very first time you tried it? Oh, well, okay, I'm impressed. Never mind. I just made that up on the spot and it was terrible, so just forget I said that. Sometimes an acquired taste has to be acquired to enjoy the finer things. I can make some analogies about alcohol, but I won't do that because there are probably minors present. But there are some things that just aren't very good the first time you try it, and then you go, oh, this is nice. And a few years later, you're like, yeah, I'm seeing this object here, and it's really great. But you have to work up to that. You don't throw children into the deep end of the pool and poke them with a stick and say, isn't swimming fun, which is pretty much what you could do. When can you get away with these fuzzy objects, though? If you have a giant doll at a dark sky site, and you can do outreach at dark sky sites where it's dark enough to see some things. I tried open clusters in the city, and sometimes open clusters will work if you have enough aperture, because you have to really pull those stars out. The fainter stars in the open clusters don't pop out unless you've got enough aperture. And it's got to be a lot brighter than for you to see it for mom and pop six-pack to be able to see it. Or electronic assistant. I really, of course, I'm a little biased because this is what I do, but I think the electronic assisted imaging is the future of outreach, because I can put a camera on there and do some really cool things. It does not have to be super high quality. Just a DSLR with a live view, or an iPhone with a live view will do it. It's very dramatic on faint targets, even under light polluted positions. You don't have any eyepiece issues because everybody's gathered around looking at it. This is what I do at the Grand Canyon when I go. And I've had 20 people behind me, and we're talking about galaxy formation, and I'm pointing to the knots in M51 on the screen. You can't do that with an eyepiece. You can't do, and it's a live image if they're looking, and that telescope's pointing at it right now. And people just totally think that is really great. So it's very crowd-friendly. It works great. It encourages a lot of discussion. And of course, it's more accessible. People in wheelchairs, the elderly, small children, anybody can look at a computer screen and see something much more easy than they can look through an eyepiece to do it. And again, it can be very expensive. You do not have to have a $5,000 CCD camera and get all that going. It is kind of nice if you have a $5,000 CCD camera. Or if you've got a dedicated astronomy camera, don't dismiss monochrome. Now I know I am in the far left or far right, out in the field when I go. Monochrome is great. You want to see color images. But if you show the public monochrome images off the telescope, they're a lot more impressed than you would think they would be. It does not have to be a color image. Plus, with monochrome, you can get a nice image with the cameras are more sensitive, and it just looks better because a color image looks kind of noisy. If you have light pollution, you can use light pollution filters on a monochrome camera. You can bin your hydrogen alpha. Full moon at the mall at Christmas next to a Christmas tree. I'm showing kids the Horsehead Nebula and the Elephant Trunk Nebula live on an iPad. And the full moon's out. And I'm just doing like 15-second exposures bin with the filter. So you can do this from an urban area without having to have a diverse diet. And I guarantee you, if you show people the Horsehead Nebula in any other way with an eyepiece from downtown anywhere, it's not going to work very well. We also have some new narrowband filters on the market. OPT, Optilong, some guys like that have come out with them. They're basically hydrogen alpha and O3 filters, plus a few other, plus some spare change. That can activate it. Those work pretty good too. You need a little bit longer exposures and a little bit faster of a telescope to make that work. But that's also very effective. I have a friend out in Phoenix that shoots with those, and it works really great. So solar outreach. Chuck wanted me to say some particular things about solar outreach. This was a program I helped up in Asheville, North Carolina a few years ago. We set up downtown Asheville, showing people the sun. It's really good. Why should the public care about the sun? And this is a question. Anybody who can tell me why the public should care about the sun? Why do we care?
It affects our weather. It affects our lives.
The Harrington event. Climate change.
You're fired. No. Absolutely correct. Absolutely correct. The sun is the closest star to us, and it affects, we can't grow crops. We can't feed ourselves. All of our energy comes from the sun, except for nuclear power. All right? Even if you're burning coal, that's stored up solar energy. All right? So we need to understand how that works. There was, in 1989, there was a big coronal mass ejection, and millions of people in Canada lost power for 9 hours. We didn't know what was causing it. Well, we kind of did at the time. But this was a massive solar flare, and this was in March. Imagine in the dead of winter, and it's 30 below zero outside, and you got 3 or 4 million people who don't have power, and that's because the sun decided to burp in our direction, or more or less in our direction, and it came across our path. So it behooves us to understand how the sun works. So when we study the sun, we're also studying other stars. When we study other stars, we're also learning about our own sun. So this is very important. It is not an abstract thing. It affects our day-to-day lives, our GPSs, all the modern conveniences of modern life. It can also destroy us. If we have a big enough flare, it would probably do a lot of damage to us. It's not. Don't get too carried away with that. You must be scared people. So my next controversial slide. I'm telling you this gently because, and again, I'm going to repeat, and I can't stress enough, everything I'm saying at one point in time had to be said to me, all right? So here it is. Here's what somebody said to me once, all right? I am not one of these people, all right? And when I talk with a bunch of scientific gobbledygook, it's not cute, all right? It's not. There are things that we take for granted that goes right over everybody else's hands. This is a hydrogen alpha telescope. Does it fly? I don't know what hydrogen alpha means. I mean, I guarantee you, I can take a survey in here, most of you know what hydrogen alpha is. Go to McDonald's and try it. Who knows what hydrogen alpha is, all right? And I'll buy you a Big Mac if you can find one person in McDonald's who knows what hydrogen alpha means. So when people are coming out of a building and you say, hey, come and look at the sun with our hydrogen alpha telescope, they're going to go, yeah, no, I gave it the office, and they're just gonna go right on by you. An angstrom is 3.9, 10. Just no, people aren't that impressed with these things. How many arc seconds can your scope resolve? People like to brag about their telescopes. Oh. See, this is a 9-inch scope, and I can resolve craters that are only 3 miles wide. Nobody cares. The difference between fission and fusion. Now, if they ask these questions, that's okay. Get them. This is how you talk about your hydrogen alpha telescope. Trick them into asking what kind of telescope it is. And then it's okay. All right? And I don't know if you've ever had this conversation with your wife, but I've had plenty. She doesn't care. Okay? But if I can trick her into being curious, then she cares. I get to explain something and feel better about myself, and she also learns something. So again, I'd like to thank my wife. She's taught me everything I know about public outreach. Cool facts. These things you take for granted. You're going to be like, are you serious? All right, the general public is totally floored when you tell them the sun is 92 million miles away. Like, are you serious? 92 million miles. And we're like, duh, you're right. People worry in the astronomy club. I don't know enough astronomy to do outreach because people are going to ask really hard questions. No, they're not. No, they're not. They don't know enough to ask really hard questions. Don't worry about it. If you have a telescope and you know enough how to use it, you kind of know what you're looking at, you know enough to do outreach and make a difference and get people excited about it. The light from the sun, when it's created in the core, can take up to 100,000 years to escape from the sun. Dude, so that sunburned light is over 100,000 years old. That's pretty cool. Also, it takes 8 minutes for the sun, once it gets away from the sun, to get here. So when you look at the sun, it's where the sun was 8 minutes ago. And when you're looking at the Mercury transit, the image of the sun you're looking at is actually 8 minutes old. Wow, that's pretty cool.
You mean if it blows up, we won't know for 8 minutes?
If it blows up, we will not know for 8 minutes. Cool facts about Mercury. Mercury, during the time of the transit, will be 36 million miles from the sun and 56 million miles from us. Now here's where it gets really cool, all right? The transit, the light from Mercury, or the absence of light from Mercury, takes 4 minutes to get to you. So, the light from the sun is 8 minutes old, and the not light from Mercury is actually 4 minutes old.
It's faster.
What's that?
It's faster.
The not light travels at the same speed as the light does, right? So it's, all right? So, all right, that's going to get you some points with anybody, especially if they've been, partaking of any sort of pharmaceutical supplements before they come to your event. But that's cool. More fun facts to share about Mercury. It's only slightly larger than our moon. How about that? Only a little bit bigger than our moon, and we consider it a whole planet. One day on Mercury is 58 of our days. So if you think your work is long, you should try it on Mercury. The transit course only occurs every 13 years, and it's going to be 13 years before we see another one. Not every 13 years, sorry. 13 times every century. All right, so the time between them varies a little bit, and it'll actually be 13 years. So you better watch it now, because 13 years from now, we could all be dead, and you would have missed the transit of Mercury, and that will be your greatest regret on your deathbed. Also, I can't say this enough, and this is like my number one problem in my marriage, in my life with outreach that my wife has to educate me about, is unless you are asked, all right, don't use SI or metric units. How big is the sun? They want to know in miles, all right? I went to engineering school, I came out, I'm like, yeah, meters, and who knew everything was in foot-pounds and things like that. So the general public, say the moon, and I hate it when I look something up in an atlas and the author was like, we use kilometers because that's what scientists use. Well, that's great, but I'm talking to my neighbor, all right, who mows lawns for a living, and he doesn't know what a kilometer is or care what a kilometer is. He wants to know how many miles it is. So I'm just going to beg you, when you're talking to the general public, use miles. If they happen to be from Europe or Canada, then you can talk about kilometers if you want. Buzzword. I got a whole list of buzzwords. Nobody knows what these mean until they've joined the astronomy club. So bear that in mind when you're talking to people. I still have some more slides. So far, does anybody want to throw tomatoes at me? No. We're good? All right, good.
Give us time.
All right. So looking at the sun, when you're doing outreach, everybody's got their fancy hydrogen alpha telescopes, but I want to kind of give you some advice. White light filters are really the best. All right? It's not the best, necessarily the best. There's nothing is the best. It's like saying, vanilla ice cream is the best. It depends on what kind of mood you're in, right? But white light is very easy to put on the front of any telescope. And honestly, when the general public looks at a hydrogen alpha telescope, a lot of times it's very hard for them to see what's going on in there. So what you see, and they're really excited, wow, you've got this aluminum foil. It's actually letting through 1/10,000th of, no, 1/100,000th of the sunlight is getting through this body solar film. And what you're seeing is what the sun actually looks like if you could look at it without burning your eyeballs out. You can see sunspots. Well, maybe not right now, you can't see sunspots, but in general, you can see sunspots with it. And facula, which are kind of the opposite of sunspots, little bright areas, also has to do with magnetic fields. If you want to really mess with people, put a continuum filter on there. A continuum filter on the back of your white light filter, it's green. And it's really fancy and very scientific. Not really. You'd think like it does this weird thing. All it is a green filter. It's like 540 nanometers. But when you take all those other wavelengths out of the white light image of the sun, you get a much better contrast. And it makes the facula and the sunspots really stand out. And people are like, wow, it's green. Why is it green? And then you can explain to them what 540 nanometers means. Because they've asked you about it. And you haven't just like pounced on them with some obscure piece of information. And the Mercury transit would probably look pretty good like this too. So hydrogen alpha, I'm not poo-pooing it. It's great. There are lots of options. LUN, Coronado, there's also Daystar, Quantum, and Quark options. They reveal a lot of cool features like prominences and surface details. Call it a special telescope. Don't say, look at my hydrogen alpha telescope. Say, we have a special telescope designed just for looking at the sun. And people were looking at it. The last 2 Mercury transits ago, I was also at the planetarium helping with the event, and the students were coming out. And a crowd of, my fellow nerds were going, hey, we've got a hydrogen alpha telescope, and you can see the prominences on the sun. And the students were like, yeah, no thanks. And I was standing there, and I said, what he means is it looks like flames are shooting out of the sun. And they were like, oh, cool, I want to look at that. And they would come over and look at it. Let that sink in, all right? Anybody in this room would get excited. Ooh, a hydrogen alpha telescope, prominences. Somebody who just got an art class or got out of Accounting 101, that sounds very intimidating to me, and I'm not going to want to go and look at that. Also, use a good light block or a hood. Put over your head. The sun is very bright, and so when you're trying to look through there, the sun is on you. You guys probably already know this, but then I don't know how many times I've seen people doing solar outreach, and they don't have any of the little hoodie thing. They use it when they're doing photography. They use it when they're at home to help them see. The general public needs that extra boost of help as well. Same goes for calcium, K-line, or one of the sodium telescopes. Somebody recently called that the calcium telescope. I thought that was funny. Kate does not stand for potassium. All right, so concluding, I'm finally done. Remember your audience. All right, remember who you're talking to. Remember who you're talking to. You're talking to people at McDonald's. I'm not disparaging McDonald's. I'm saying this is the general public. It's not the astronomy club. It's not the science club. It's not your engineering friends from work. It's not the people from Big Bang Theory. Okay, it's general people. Effective communication skills are the most important thing when you're doing outreach. Learning how to talk to people will get you a long way. You can actually assume children know more than adults.
They do.
All right? That is the truth. A friend of mine said, you can't say that. People are going to get upset. I'm like, no. This is the truth. Children actually know a lot more than adults. Don't just push people through a queue. Try to make the experience interactive. Try to get them to describe to you what they see, get them to ask questions about it, and get them to realize why what they're doing is important without you necessarily lecturing at them. Also, this is really where my wife has revolutionized my coffee and cosmos thing, is you need a carnival barker, all right? You need somebody there who does not have a telescope, And their job is to walk around getting people to come and look through the telescopes. Because what happens is, I'm very engaged with this person, and I'm not paying attention to the people who are going, look at what they're doing, and I'm going to move on. So you want, hey, come over and look through the telescope. Yeah, it's free. Open to the public. Come and look at it. You need that person to do that. Also, they can come and kick you in the seat of the pants and they catch you looking through the telescope and not paying any attention to whoever is around you. So, Mercury transit. My plan is to bring 2 telescopes. One with a camera shooting the whole time, and one that I can talk to people and have them look and all that sort of thing. But anyway, that's all I have, and I will shut up now.